We're going to be in Matthew chapter 6 this morning. We're again going through the Sermon on the Mount, and this is a little bit of a transition spot. So we have several little sub-series within the series. There, we talked about integrity the last few weeks, and it might seem like I would still stick with that theme, talking about giving and the way that we do that here in chapter 6. But I want to look at it in a little bit different way. And the title this morning is almost backwards. I'm looking at it here. In case y'all ever wonder why, maybe not all of you know, but there's a reflection of the monitor is down here on this monitor, and so sometimes I look down there. Sometimes when my 53-year-old eyes don't want to focus on my Bible, I just read it on the screen. So, that is also helpful. Some of you may be thinking, why is he always looking right above his Bible? It's there. It's right there. That's just the way it is. But the title might be a little bit backwards. It is the hidden power of generosity. But I think as we look at this passage, you could say it the other way too. The power of hidden generosity. Because this is also what Jesus is getting at. We've had several things already this morning where this lesson will in some ways apply. We're collecting backpacks for Helping Hands. We're collecting cookies for VBS kids. We are just wrapping up, doing the roof, which required incredible generosity. And there were a lot of people who took Jesus' words to heart and gave sacrificially and did that in a way that was very humble and unseen and unknown, the way that it ought to be. So, the nice thing is that as we come to this passage, we're not coming to it in some sort of now start doing this. This is just an encouragement that as we do this, and as we do it as Jesus said, keep up the good work. And that's really where we are this morning. So, Matthew 6, starting in verse 1 and through verse 4, let's read this together. I'll be in the ESV this morning, and it is on YouVersion if you like to use that. He says, "Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them. For then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. And your Father, who sees you in secret, will reward you." All right. First, y'all are going to be happy about this. I just set my timer, but the reading of the passage, that was free. I love that. All right. So Jesus has just been talking a lot, again, about things like integrity, talking about that if you claim to follow Jesus and if you say that what you're doing is out of faith, then these things ought to be true. Your marriage, you ought to be faithful. Now, you're one party in a marriage. You can't always control the other person. But for your part, you need to be a faithful person. And your heart life, especially he focuses on, your heart life and your thought life need to match that outward confession. You can't just be married. You can't just wear a ring. You got to live the ring, right? You need to be a person that in your heart is faithful. He goes on and talks about if you say that you love the Lord and you love your neighbor. Okay, then what are you hating people for? How are those things compatible? What are not? So fix your heart, fix your thought life. Stop hating on people inside your head. And love as Jesus has loved you. That's the higher standard that he'll call us to later on. So that's where he's at. He comes into giving and he says, well, now let's talk about this. Let's talk about generosity. And this is not really giving in the sense of some of the things I just mentioned. Specifically, he's not talking about things like roofs. Those are things we have to take care of. Those are responsibilities. But I'm not sure that the needy in the community are that impacted by a fresh roof. Now, things we do under that roof will impact them, but you see what I'm saying. So that's additional. And they had that too. They had to take care of the temple, and they had to take care of those facilities and everything else, and there was giving for that. It was separate under the Jewish system, the giving that was done, the temple tax, they would call it, and then there was also the giving that was done for distribution to those who were needy. And we do that too. This church does that in various ways. Obviously, there are needs that come up from time to time where we will address those and help people with those. There is a regular help that people need, such as help through Good Samaritan, and we monthly give part of our budget to Good Samaritan because they do a very good and faithful job of organizing that and distributing that in a way that blesses our community and gives honor to God. And so we do that. What we don't do and what we don't want to do is what Jesus is talking about here, where you walk outside and say, look what I just did, right? And that's what we might say, this is kind of crazy, but that's what happens all the time in our world, isn't it? When we read this, let's go back to verse 1. It says, beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them. Jesus wants us to focus on a couple of phrases here. This is one. When we give, but it's not out of the altruism of this person needs help. It is, I want people to see me helping this person who needs help. And I think we can relate to this maybe a little bit more closely than we realize in the way that he talks about it. And he says, you have some of these people that go around and they blast their trumpets, right? And I have helped. I brought a printed train horn because I don't have a trumpet, okay? But can you imagine a world in which people walk into church and they come up here to the basket and they pull out their wallet and they say, look at here, like that. Somebody just checked their hearing aid, right? Was there whistling again? My grandfather's whistled like that. And they're like, look at me. I'm about to give. What would you do if somebody did that next week? Honestly, what would you do? You'd probably go up and yank their whistle. You're probably about ready to do mine. Look what I did, one more time. So, but that's the problem, right? And it's all to say, hey, look at me. And it's hard to fathom that people did that. But people did that. So in the Roman world, and he says it's happening among the Jews, and I wonder, I don't know this for a fact, but I wonder if a part of the criticism of them doing this was that they were looking and acting like the pagan world around them as they did it. I think that's part of what's going on here. But in the Roman world, people would sometimes do this. Why would they do that? Just before they do a nice thing, before they do a big, generous gift, why would they go and blast trumpets? Attention, pride, elite status. I want you to know I am this kind of a person. I want to show a little bit of flex so that you know that I have the money to give this kind of gift. So it's not even, look how generous I am. It's, look how much I must have kept for me to be this generous. And aren't you impressed with me? I'm successful. Too bad for you. That sort of a thing. Now, does that sound familiar? Could you imagine that in a modern context where people do that? I think we could. Show of hands, honest show of hands, everybody who has, I don't care which one it is, form of social media. Okay, you have it. You're using it every day, but you've got it. Okay, some of you lied because I've seen you. I know where your account is. But you thought you were, I don't have social media. Ooh, new friend request. Look at that. That's, but there are the people that didn't raise a hand, and some of them are also saying, look at me. I don't have social media. And they're doing a little bit of that. We flex in many ways, don't we? We flex in many ways. Oh, if you had that, though, my point is, you know what it's like to hear a trumpet blast when somebody is giving. Because it doesn't look and sound like that. It looks an awful lot like this. Right? And they do, oh, I just reset my timer. Well, that was free too. Look at that. And they, I'm liking this already. But they do. They do a little bit of that. They do a little bit of that. They do a little bit of this. And every now and then, can I do a pet peeve little soap? It has nothing lesson right, but in these photos, a lot. Young ladies, I want to help you restore some of your dignity for a moment. Stop doing this, okay? This is just like duck lips. Don't do it, okay? This, every time you're in a picture on the front row, just tell them I'm not doing it. I am a child of God, and I can stand upright for a photo, okay? But that's what they do, and they get in the group photo, and everybody does this, and they do that sort of a thing, and look what I gave. They do it on mission trips. They do it working at the Good Samaritan, all over the place. This kind of stuff happens. And if we're not careful, even if we went with the right motives and with the right heart, if we're not careful, the selfie becomes a selfish selfie, right? And it becomes a way of us blasting our trumpet. It doesn't mean you could go somewhere and you're serving people, you can't take pictures, okay? That's fine. But think about how that comes across and examine your own motives. Don't go around examining everybody else's motives. You may misread why somebody posts a photo. You may assume they're blasting a trumpet when in fact they are trying to show you not themselves but the person they're with that they think is awesome and that they want you to pray for. Don't be judged. Just look at yourself and ask, why am I doing this? Why am I about to share this? Why do I want people to see this? There are ways to do it that will bring glory to God. But Jesus says there are ways to do it. Clearly the glory was all about your own. It was all about yourself. Examine your motives in the way that you give. And then he gives this warning. Because the reward you will receive for your generosity and for your giving or for your service, it may not be money, it may be time and effort, but the reward you'll receive will have just been that 30 seconds of attention. And that'll be it. That'll be the end of it. An example in some ways of how this can sometimes go a little bit wonky is Dale Carnegie. You know, a lot of people know about Carnegie or Carnegie if you're in certain neighborhoods. It depends. But incredibly wealthy man, earned an awful lot of money, was the first true billionaire in the United States, maybe anywhere, I have no idea. Probably not. Solomon still existed. But certainly a very, very wealthy man. He was a generous man. Now again, just like in Rome, some people do a lot of generosity because it's a little bit of flex, it's a bit of attention. It gives the impression of a certain character that you're trying to broadcast and virtue signal to the world around you. And I don't know anything about whether that was his case or not. Okay, so he and the Lord can sort that out. But one of the things that he did was to establish libraries. Who remembers the old Carnegie Library? It would take you back to pre-1965, if I remember right, is when they tore it down. But there was a Carnegie Library here in Brownwood. Cool old building. Go Google it. I meant to have that slide in here. It didn't make it. It's on my office computer, and I made my slides at home, so, there you are. But go Google the Brownwood Carnegie Library. Funny thing, he actually did not prefer his name to be on those libraries. People did it in his honor, sometimes after he passed away, because they were impressed with his generosity. But he actually preferred that those libraries would be named for their community instead, to honor the community as a whole. So he would have rather it been the Brown County or the Brownwood Library, public library, as it is now. But that's the way that went. You know how many of those he established? Over 2,000. Over 2,000 libraries in our country, and these weren't the only ones. There are Carnegie libraries in Ireland and other countries. So incredible generosity seems to, at least on some level, have attempted to make that something that was true generosity and not a way of just drawing attention. Certainly there are other ways when you're trying to just make it all about you that could happen. When we were first in New York, we had a senator, a Republican senator, that loved getting his name on every building, bridge, and property he could. And he did bring a lot of projects to that part of the state. He was a senator from state senator, not a federal. And he would bring a lot of money back to the county, and he was a good senator for his region in terms of getting good things done. But there was always a trade-off. I'm going to need my name on that. So there was his bridge, and there was his park, and there may have been a library branch. And there were all these things with his name just all over it. And that doesn't strike you the same, does it? It's not the same thing, because it was about self and image and attention. Jesus says sometimes we do the same thing, and we need to be very careful about the way we do our acts of righteousness. They don't have to be before anybody else, and they should not be to draw attention to ourselves. When we do, our generosity becomes a performance. Look at me. And it becomes empty of its true heart. And the people that it's meant to help often become lost in it all, in the shuffle. People set up a photo op, they take all their pictures. Politicians do this all the time. They take all these pictures and they drive off with all of the praise for this new program and these new funds, and then what happens? Nothing. And sometimes the problem actually just gets absolutely worse. You could pick any day of the week and you can find news about times where that has happened and is ongoing, and it just happens all the time. It becomes a performance. It becomes a photo op. When we do that, we do trade eternal impact we could have had for just a temporary flash. Wow, I'm old. I was going to say a flash bulb. Who even knows what that is? I had those, little flash cube things, but just for a temporary flash. And what Jesus says in that passage, and let me go back to it for a second, is you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. Why? Elsewhere, when Jesus is talking about the same thing in Scripture, he says, they have received their reward in full. Talking about the Pharisees in that context. They have received their reward in full. The little attention you got, the little photo app that you shared, that's all you're getting. But we're told to lay up for ourselves treasures in heaven. And he says, yeah, that was not a deposit. It was not. That didn't, for lack of a better phrase, that didn't count. It didn't count because you made it about something it was not supposed to be. Going down to verse 2. Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Again, what's their motive? That they may be praised by other people. Why are they tooting their own horn? Why do we have that phrase? Is that phrase ever spoken of in a positive light? He or she really loves to toot their own horn? No, that's never said positively. Jesus doesn't think so either. He says, oh, those people are hypocrites. Don't be like that. Let me sound your own horn. They do this out in the synagogue. Again, showing up, as we would say it, showing up at church. Look at me. They can't come in and just put it in the basket over to the side. It's got to be, look what I did. Maybe stop in front of the camera so the people online can see. Did you see it? Did you read that? Look what I'm doing. That sort of a thing. This was happening. And it still happens. He said they've received their reward completely, in full, done. There's another aspect, though. Look back at this phrase. What does Jesus assume? He doesn't say if, he says when. It would be easy for us to say, well, I don't want the right, he goes on and talks about the right hand and the left hand. I don't want my right hand to know what the left hand is doing. So, giving's to be done in secret. And then we never do. It's so secret, our wallet never even knew. Right? That's how secret it was. The bank didn't even know. Don't know. Why? Because we didn't really. But Jesus makes an assumption. You are going to give. You are going to be generous. You are going to be kind. Again, he's not talking about actually stuff to cover responsibilities and dues and all those kinds of things. It applies, but what's he talking about? He's talking about when you give to people who need it, when you give to the poor. And he's not assuming that'll just be done through what's collected here to give to the poor. He's assuming that when you are out and around on Tuesday, you may be doing this. And when you do, maybe you want to give to somebody who's stopped at the red light over there by Aldi and the Boot Barn. You're in a small town when Aldi and the Boot Barn. And we all know what I'm talking about, right? Sitting there in the shade of a cactus, like Jonah. And there he is. Maybe you want to help that guy out. And so you pull over, you get out of your car, you chirp your horn so the people in line can see you. Really? Look at me. Again, this happens. I've actually been behind people who didn't get out of the car and honk the horn, but made sure that the rest of us saw. Last time I saw this was in Austin, because that situation comes up a lot in Austin. Look at here, like, hey, y'all. Sometimes people will do the same thing. I saw it the other day in regard to buying people. They were paying it forward. Paying it forward meant they were buying blizzards for people. I'm not really sure that that's the most important thing to pay it forward with. It's kind of like when people consider buying an upper middle class person in a Cadillac Escalade a coffee because they were behind them in line at Starbucks. I'm not sure that's generosity. I would really consider that a waste of money more than generosity, probably bad stewardship. They clearly don't need it, and maybe you should have found somebody more in need. Maybe your judgment's a little off. But then you post about it, on the thing, or you watch to make sure. I hope they hashtagged me. I hope they saw what I did, and you're checking to see did they thank me on the Facebook, And then there's an age tag, the Facebook. I just gave away a hint there, didn't I? Anyway, he assumes you are going to give, and he wants it to be for the right reasons and for the right motives and in the right way. There are right reasons, and there are right motives, and there are right ways. So one of the right ways is do it humbly, do it quietly. No attention, just go do it. Nobody has to know. And that can be difficult at times. Sometimes maybe you're wanting to be especially generous, and people that you have to give it to. I'll use the roof example. You got to give that to somebody. Somehow they have to cash the thing, right? They have to go and take that to the bank. Somebody eventually is going to know. And so when people want to do that kind of thing, they will say, listen, this is nobody's business, because they're trying to practice this. This is nobody's business. Keep that quiet. And that's the way you have to handle that. Let me handle the other side of the equation for a second. If you're one of those people that is in the process of having to receive donations, maybe you volunteer at Good Samaritan, maybe it's you're somebody who counts funds here or keeps track of different things, maybe for missions or whatever, make sure you don't fall into the equal and opposite side of that coin, the equal and opposite trap. That is that when other people give quietly, you're keeping track. Leadership in churches can fall into the trap of checking to see who's given and who's not given, who's doing and who's not doing, and then judging based off of that, or demanding based off of that. And no Christian leader should ever fall into that trap, because that's not our business. Okay? I don't know what y'all give, and I should not know what y'all give. That is none of my business. You know whose business is? Who should know that? Jesus. What other human should know that? I call him Mr. Nunya business. Nobody else should know that, right? There's practical things. Somebody's going to have to make a deposit slip, and all of those kinds of things. There's a little bit of impossibility at some point, because we're not in a coin society. If we were still in a coin society, those things are anonymous, and maybe that's how you fix that, right? You can do that, and there are times where people will purposefully not write a check that week, but do cash because they don't want people to know or notice a change. We on the leadership side need to be people who are faithful not to be paying attention. Okay? That's not our business. It's tempting, because you might see things there that you want to applaud. Good, incredible examples you want to applaud. But if it's not your place, it's not your place. You might see things there that reveal all talk and no action. And that, again, tempting, not your place. Just hand that one over to Mr. Nunya, because it's none of your business. Just keep going, right? Keep going. Sometimes on both sides, we have to make sure we're not falling. I keep wanting to change the words. Not falling into that trap. So he says, truly I say to you, they've received. And I put this in, you probably can't tell, you cannot tell. I turn around now, you know. But the word hypocrite and the phrase have received a reward are highlighted there in a different color. Why? Because hypocrites that have made it about themselves, and he says this is what you become when you do, that'll be the end of that. That will not bring blessing from God. And giving generously does bring blessing from God. Not so that you can go and get a bigger house or buy an Escalade. That is not what God promised, despite many churches preaching that false notion. In 2 Corinthians 8 and 9, he says, if you are generous and if you give, and that again was to the poor, people who were starving during a famine in Jerusalem, that if you give, God will provide for you again. And he says, why? So that you can give again to somebody else. It's always going to be for that purpose. So if you give and then suddenly you're blessed, it wasn't God rewarding you with a bonus. It was God saying, let's go do that again. Let's go do that again. And he wants us to remember that because they forgot it. Ask yourself this question. What if the most powerful acts of kindness are the ones that no one sees? Years ago, when we were in New York, we were watching the movie, oh, good night, I just lost the title of it. Christian movie. It was one of the first Christian movies that really kind of made it big. It was about the football team in the small town. What did you say? Facing the Giants. That was it. Thank you. Facing the Giants. In Facing the Giants, there is a very generous act of providing a vehicle for somebody, and it was also an answer to prayer. And when we watched that movie, and several people, there was a lot of buzz around that. When we watched that movie, one of my friends, who is a minister as well, was talking about how, it was a really great movie. It had a really great positive message, but I just am afraid that people are going to get the impression that those kinds of things happen. And those things don't ever happen. Okay, context. So, at that time, I don't remember the exact year that movie came out, but around that time, either just before or just after, we went through very difficult times because of the 2007 and 2008 financial crisis. People all over the country did, obviously. And it for our community, that was a very hard hit. There were people who couldn't afford to gas up their vehicle to come to church. It was rough, okay? Really, really rough. And at the time, our own finances were incredibly tight. And I've told y'all before, one of my strong memories of that time period was we were standing in Hannaford. That was like our United grocery store. We were standing in Hannaford. I could take you to the aisle at the exact store in front of the soy sauce. And I'm looking at the soy sauce, and I really wanted to buy Kikkoman soy, okay? I'm not a name brand person, but I'm picky about my soy sauce, and now I consider Kikkoman trash soy. I wouldn't buy it. But anyway, I wanted the Kikkoman soy, but I couldn't afford the Kikkoman soy. I had to buy, I've never said Kikkoman so many times in my life, but I wanted that, but I couldn't. I needed to buy the house brand, which I buy house brands all the time. Again, not snotty. But that was like $1.26 compared to $2.40 or something like that. Things were tight enough, that made a difference. If I buy the house brand, then I can get some Rio Star grapefruit from Texas, because they had those over there too. Well, what am I going to do? You got to buy the Rio Star. So, you buy the Kikkoman soy sauce. It was a tight time, just a way to illustrate how tight it was. At the same time, our van was dying. Okay, our van was dying. And so I had to do a bunch of repairs. I couldn't afford to go to the mechanic, but I could afford to get the parts and borrow the tools from AutoZone, I think it was, or Advance Auto, whichever one. And so I go and I borrow the tools to do inner tie rods, and there was an ABS sensor and several other things. Anyway, saved hundreds of dollars by doing this myself. Didn't bother me. I was happy to do it. YouTube was a brand new thing, and so I'm sitting there learning how to do some of these things off of the interwebs and figuring out how to do it. It was great. I enjoyed it, actually. I wrote a blog about it. And in the blog, I was talking about insights I had while I was underneath the van, working under the van. That was the whole thing, things I learned underneath the minivan. And so that's all it was. A Christian I'm going to choke up, sorry. A Christian back here in Texas read that post. Now, in the post, there are no complaints. I was excited about some of the things that I thought of while I was under the car. That's not, the car was incidental. It was just where I was. It was the context. And this person said, well, no, we sent our missionary up there to spread the gospel. Why is he having to spend so much time under that van? When we moved here, you may remember we had a Honda Odyssey. Very nice van. It was a used van, fairly low miles, very reasonably priced, but a really great van. We just drove the hound out of that van. We typically drive well into the six figures, and we did with that one. And I had a lot of life when it was still left when we got rid of it. This guy is saying those things never happen. And all I wanted to say, I said nothing, but all I wanted to say was, go look in the parking lot. Because an anonymous Christian, whose name I will not tell you, then put a bug in the ear of that church, and several people pitched in and bought a van. That kind of generosity is incredible. The kind of humility in their spirit that nobody ever knew is the kind God blesses. And I pray God's blessing on those people for their incredible gift. But that's one example. I have seen that happen to others over and over and over again. Not only does it happen, but in the kingdom of God, it's a regular part of the kingdom economy. Generous hearts, watching for needs, jumping in wherever they can, with no fanfare, no spotlights, no selfies, no social media posts, no corporate sponsorships, none of those things that people do to get attention. Just the love of Christ.